We've been fed lies that keep us sick, tired, and dependent. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode on Meet the Truth podcast. I'm your host, Jason Barrett. I'm the Carnivore pharmacist. And today we're going to tackle the reason why we've been fed these lies and who stands to benefit from these lies. Um, as a pharmacist, I see thousands of prescriptions filled, and almost nobody gets better, where they take it for a little while and then they just get to stop taking it and the problem's been solved. A lot of times, once they end up on a medicine, they stay on that medicine and maybe for the rest of their life. And if it's not for the rest of their life, usually when they get switched, it's just to another medicine. Um, you got to stop and just ask yourself, why do people stay sick even when they're following all the rules? They're going to these doctors. They're taking the medicine as prescribed. Maybe the doctor's telling them to eat a certain way or to take this supplement or to live a certain lifestyle. And they go do that. And they go do that with the full, hope that it's all going to get better and that they're going to return to a state of health that they probably had when they were younger or that they've had not that long ago. And they follow all the rules. They're doing everything right, but they're not getting better. In fact, they may be developing deficiencies. They may be developing side effects to these medications. And then they go back to the doctor and they go, "Hey, doc, like this medicine, number one, it's not, the problem's not gone. And number two, now I've got this side effect." And then they get told, "Oh, well, don't worry about that. I've got another pill I can give you that'll help with that side effect." Well, fast forward that out, and I've seen this scenario play out plenty of times where, after, a few months or a few years, however long it takes, they're on a half a dozen or more medications now. They don't feel better. They're having to go see multiple specialists. They're having to go to the pharmacy or come see me multiple times a month. And whenever I go out and have a conversation, "Hey, you feeling better? Is this actually working for you?" And they're like, "To be honest with you, no, not nearly as well as I thought. Am I going to have to be on this for the rest of my life? Like, why am I not getting better?" And I will be honest with you, it does get frustrating having that conversation and, seeing that, because most healthcare professionals, I promise you, when we signed up to become those, when we decided to go to school to get this degree to do that, it was to help sick people get better, not to help sick people kind of sort of stay the same, or it's instead of, we wanted to reverse disease. We wanted to cure it or whatever, get to the bottom of it and have them feeling well again, return wellness to these individuals, not just sign them up for a subscription they don't want to be on for the rest of their life. So let's go ahead and talk about who stands to benefit from this model and maybe how we got here. There's three big entities out there that benefit from this being kind of the model of society that we live in these days. And that is big food, big pharma, and big insurance. And I'm going to dive into each one of those. Um, but first and foremost, whenever we say big pharma, I know you heard me say I'm a pharmacist. Let me clarify. I'm not talking about individual pharmacies or definitely not pharmacists. I'm talking about big pharma. I'm talking about the big pharmaceutical industries that are worth hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, there's no telling how much money is circulating out there and why they stand to benefit. We'll talk about that based on this model. But it all begins with food. Um, in today's society, and this is vastly different from 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, honestly, but we are surrounded these days with foods that they're calling foods that are just detrimental to your health for a variety of reasons. I'm going to give you a short list here in a minute. I made an acronym that made it pretty memorable that we're going to go through. And it explains a lot of what's in and up being very bad metabolic outcomes for people. And it's why they're getting sick. And it's why they're ending up going to the doctor. And it's also why they're staying sick for a long time. Well, think about it. They came out with the food pyramid a few decades ago. And then nowadays they're preaching everything in moderation. Well, go into your average grocery store or your supermarket and go look at these. Just like really look, grab it and turn it around and read the back label and tell me how many of those are just single ingredient whole foods that you know what every ingredient is in there and it's actually healthy and it's going to be nothing but good for you. It's a pretty short list. In fact, you almost have to stay on the perimeter of the store, you know, in your fresh produce section or in your meats or your eggs or whatever it may be. You kind of stay on the outside, and that's where you're really going to probably find the most whole food single ingredient that have nothing added or haven't been modified or haven't been changed in some way to where they're basically adding a bunch of non-food ingredients to make these things last longer or to make them look better or to make them taste better or in some way to help out the food industry to make more money. Okay. Not only that, but if you let's say that you stay away from the perimeter of the store. Well, these foods that are in the middle, guess what? Not only do they look better and taste better and they check all the boxes, but they're highly addictive. So once you start eating them, it's hard to stop. After you eat them, you're like, God, that was good, man. Like it tastes good. You don't feel so great afterwards. And a lot of times, after you eat them, you're going to have that midday slump, or it causes some GI problems, or your energy dips, or whatever it may be. Sometimes you don't even know the problems are deriving from the food that you're putting in your body, but they're highly addictive to the point to where you crave them. You want them. Every time you go to the store, you see it on the shelf, you're going to buy it and you're going to eat it and you're going to enjoy it. And the thing is you start doing that. Well, if it starts taking away from your health and it actually starts making you sick, well, guess what? It makes you sick enough not to kill you. It's not just pure poison. There's no money in that, but it makes you sick enough that now you have to go to the doctor. Now you get to the doctor, they end up running a bunch of diagnostics and tests, which costs you money, costs you time. And then you get diagnosed with something, even if it's nothing serious, even if they just say, hey, you got high blood pressure and your blood sugar's high. We're going to write you a couple of prescriptions. You need to go down to the pharmacy and start taking it. And supposedly it's going to fix everything. Well, you get down there, you start taking these things. Well, here's the thing. When they're treating only symptoms and not getting to the root cause, saying, why do we have these problems? Where did they come from? What's behind all of this? Let's try to get rid of that problem instead. And they go, you got a symptom. Here's a pill for the symptom. Well, guess what? It'd be like if a house was on fire and instead of the fire department showing up with firefighters to put it out, they showed up and they started blowing cold air on it and they started sucking the smoke off and they started doing all this random stuff that isn't actually putting the fire out. It's only treating the symptoms of it. And I could give several scenarios. It'd be like you had an infection, and instead of actually giving you an antibiotic to treat it, they only told you to do something to reduce the symptom, which is a fever. Well, that's not treating the infection. And if you happen to not have a very good immune system, or if it's a very serious infection, that could be very serious or even fatal. Okay. But they don't do that. Instead, they actually treat those things. So there's certain things that are root causal and they get to the bottom of it and the fire goes out. And you don't have to take a pill for the rest of your life. But the vast majority of these diseases these days, it falls into symptom or disease management, where you're labeled with this and then just treated for the symptoms that actually kind of get better when you're on the medication. But if you stop taking that medication, they're coming back with a vengeance, and you're going to be just as debilitated as you were before you ever went to the doctor, maybe worse. And the thing is, once you get on these medications, they have side effects. Sometimes they lead to nutrient depletions or other things. Sometimes they can affect the absorption or the acidity of your stomach. And if that's happening, then it's going to change what your body's absorbing, even from the foods that you've always eaten. Now, even if you eat good food, you may not be able to absorb it. I mean, half of the battle is being able to absorb what you eat. If you don't have that function, you're still going to be deficient, even though you are technically getting it. And so think about it. It's a pretty complex thing out there, but think about it from a profitability standpoint. Is it more profitable for big pharma or big insurance to treat your symptoms and basically turn you into a subscription? Or is it more profitable for you to come in and them to take care of your problem, forever, to where basically you come in, they give you one course of treatment, you're good, or even better, to tell you what you could do to prevent the problem from ever happening to begin with? The answer is obvious. And so, like I said, big insurance, they're also in there for every step of the way. Anybody who's ever dealt with insurance, whether that's because you've had to run claims as a medical professional or that you had to use your insurance as a consumer, You know that they tell you which doctor you can go to. They tell the doctor which tests and diagnostics and lab work that he can even run on you. After those are approved and those come back, then he can diagnose you, but he can only prescribe what they say he can prescribe. Because if you go to the pharmacy with what he writes, a lot of times the insurance is going to just either flat out reject it or tell your pharmacy that you need to do a prior authorization, which means you're probably going to have to try some other medications or some other less expensive options first. And so essentially, you got to run through this whole thing to even get to what the doctor actually wants to do, to take the medicine that the doctor wants you to take. And it may take you 6 months to a year to jump through all these hoops to even get there. And even then, even if you get all the way to that, it may just be something to treat the symptom anyway, you know? And so think about it from that standpoint, from big food, from big pharma, from big insurance, when they can impact you with the food supply to where you get sick enough that it's going to cause a metabolic problem, make you go to the doctor, use your insurance. Then you get put on something that you're going to have to stay on for the rest of your life. So you got a subscription you don't want. It'd be like having a Netflix subscription you didn't ask for and you can't get off of, and you're stuck with it. And it has side effects. You know what I mean? And then, you know, when you go not only to the doctor, but when you run your labs or your diagnostics and at the pharmacy level, insurance is making money on all of those. It's a cycle. It's a cycle. Well, guess what? That's because we've all been fed a lie. And to be honest with you, it's, we've been fed a lie that's told us to feed ourselves with foods that are non-foods, that are not healthful, but they are tearing our health down. They're making us sick enough that we need to go to the doctor. And from that, we're feeding diseases. We're feeding inflammation that is usually causing these diseases. And from that, we're feeding, you might notice the theme here, but we're feeding the pocketbooks of those three big organizations. And we've been doing so for decades now. And it's only getting worse. I mean, think about it. Over the last few decades, the rates of obesity, the rates of all these chronic inflammatory conditions, autoimmune things that used to be super rare. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I would hear about some autoimmune thing, and it was like super rare to hear about that, And nowadays, like every other person I talk to has at least one. Some of them have multiple. And essentially, as soon as they get to the autoimmune realm, at least in my experience, when I'm talking to the doctors, when I was talking to multiple rheumatologists, including going all the way to the Mayo Clinic, as soon as they go, oh, it's autoimmune, there's no cure. Basically, we're just going to try to manage these symptoms and just try to slow the progression. But just going to let you know, there's no hope. Like you're stuck with this thing. And I accepted that, and I played that game, and I honestly, to be honest with you, I thought the medicine was gonna save me. Again, I'm a pharmacist. I did happen to get sick, and I showed up. I went to, several different doctors and specialists and got referred to this, a neurologist, and I got referred to a rheumatologist, and they referred me to the Mayo Clinic, and I came back and I sought out my own specialists as well to see if I could find some answers in some other parts of it. And every time, I was just kind of told this, and I tried dozens of medications, including pretty much every anti-inflammatory medication there is in the pharmacy, from steroids to NSAIDs to your DMARDs like methotrexate and hydroxychloroquine. Anybody who's taken those knows what I'm talking about. And then to the big guns, your biologics, the ones that are very immunosuppressive. They actually do work better than most of those other drugs, but they come with some very, very serious side effects, such as, since they're suppressing your immune system, any infection could become serious or fatal. And also, your rates of multiple types of cancers go up drastically just from being on this medication, because your immune system is now unable to properly identify and remove cancerous cells when they pop up. And so your risk for that goes up substantially. And you've got all that in the back of your head. So you can't win for losing. You're treating the inflammation with these powerful, powerful medications, but now you know that you could die from cancer or you could get a serious infection, amongst other things. So anyway, I mean, when we're told what to eat, And then we get sick, and then we're sold the solution. It's a very profitable model when you stop and think about it. Just stop and go. Who benefits from this model? Who benefits? Those three, I'm going to call them the three big villains. They benefit, and they don't want that to change. Now, let me touch base for what actually worked for me, and that was the carnivore diet. And let me explain more about it. First of all, I didn't think it was going to work. I'd already tried dozens of other diets. I'd tried everything under the sun. It wasn't until a friend of mine had told me, "Hey, there's a certain doctor I think you should go see, a little bit different flavor. It's kind of an integrative medicine, functional medicine type doctor. He's an MD, but he's gone further." And I'm like, "Okay, don't know much about that, let me go check it out." So I go up there, and he, this is after the Mayo Clinic. This is after a decade plus of being debilitated with multiple autoimmune chronic inflammatory conditions. I go see him, and one of the things he wanted to do a bunch of stuff, but one of the things he wanted to do was a food sensitivity panel. It was a blood test, and they tested me, and I mean, it came back, and it was like, I thought it was gonna be a one pager that was just like, had a few things on there like gluten and lactose and some big ones. No, this thing was a 17-page report. It went through all your different food groups. It went through, and then it even broke it down into sections, for all your fruits, all your veggies, all your nuts, all your proteins, and all your various different things, all your like legumes. And then it broke it, and it gave you a numerical value and a color coding, and it basically went through and just boom, it's a very in-depth report. And at the end of it, it gave you a less restrictive and a more restrictive diet based on these results. Well, mine was just because, like I said, it had a color coding. It would give it a green color if it was okay to eat, yellow if it's in moderation, meaning you should take it away if you're going to do an elimination diet, and then try to bring it back and see if it's problematic. It could be problematic. And red, if you don't touch this with a 10-foot pole. Like, it's bad. We know this one's bad. Had a sea of red. Okay, you gotta understand. When I got down there, the doctor was like, "Hey, I recommend starting with the less restrictive diet." And I'm like, "No, no, no, you don't understand. I'm so desperate, doctor. I've been so debilitated for so many years. I am so desperate for answers. If you told me to stand on my head and drink vinegar through my nose 3 times a day, I would happily, happily do that if it would work. I'm doing the more restrictive diet." When I look at that, it was all but telling me to do the carnivore diet. And so I'm like, this sounds like the craziest diet I've ever heard. I'm going to be constipated. All this red meat sounds inflammatory, and all this saturated fat's going to clog up my arteries. I'm going to have gout. I'm going to have so many problems, on this thing that I don't see how it could possibly work. But went and did a little bit of research and kind of found out why it worked. And it wasn't so much what was in the diet, but what was not in the diet. In fact, carnivore is an elimination diet. You have to keep that in mind. What it gives you is a short list, but it is critical. It gives you, it's packed, especially if you're sticking to fatty cuts of ruminant meats like beef, or eggs, or fatty cuts, fish. Um, I like to stick mostly to beef because that just seems to be, over the years, that's what works the best for me. But it's packed with minerals and vitamins and nutrients. Not only that, it's got all your essential amino acids and proteins that you need. It's got both essential fatty acids, omega-3 and omega-6, as well as other fats as well. It gives you plenty of calories. It's a premium source of fuel with no carbohydrates and no extra stuff, no toxins, no non-food products that end up in a bunch of these foods on the shelves that I'm going to dive into here in just a minute. And that's what it gives you and nothing else. So it gives you what you need. And what it basically allows your body to do is it gives it premium fuel with no extra unwanted, and it allows your body not only to flourish because it's got a premium source of fuel, but it also allows it to heal. If it's been inundated with all these problematic foods and it's been storing these toxins away, or it's been having to fight against them or ramp up inflammation because there's problems that are coming from the food you're eating, from the poisons, the toxins that are going into your body, those aren't coming in anymore. It gets a chance to actually start clearing them out. And once those are clear, the inflammation drops and the body goes, "Oh, thank God. Now I can heal myself." And let me tell you, there's not a medicine out there that's better medicine to heal yourself than your own human body. It knows how to do that very well. It does, if given the chance. Now food's important, but you still got to take care of yourself. Of course, you want to remove all these toxins, go on elimination diet, but you also want to make sure you're getting hydrated properly. You're getting plenty of electrolytes. You're getting plenty of sleep and rest and recovery. And you also want to make sure that, your stress levels aren't completely out of control, because if you just fix the diet, but everything else, the house is burning down every day, then you're still feeding the problem, just not with food. You're feeding it with other things. So it's very important to look at everything you're feeding your body. Um, but like I said, it that's what it does. It's an elimination diet. And let me give you a short list that I've created. I made an acronym so it's easy to recall, and I'm going to go down this list. But this is just a list of everything that's not in carnivore that we are inundated, especially if you're eating any sort of processed food that you're buying from the store, that's in the middle of the store on the shelves. If it's in a plastic bag or a can or a package, and it's going to last, and its shelf life is months to years, versus think about the fresh stuff. Think about produce. Think about your meats. Think about some things that don't have all that. They're not going to last that long. They put them out there. They might last a week or two, maybe, if they keep them in refrigeration. But if they went out and put them at room temperature out on the shelf, how long would they last? Not very long. That's the first test that you can do. But let me give you. So the acronym that I've made is called SAD TOXIN MAP, and this covers the majority of all the toxins that are out there. And I'm just going to go down it. So seed oils, cannot say enough. These are extremely inflammatory. These are feeding so much inflammation these days, and they are in everything. Seed oils are huge. Added sugars and sweeteners. Do I need to tell you how addictive sugar is? Do I need to? It is the best tasting poison that has ever been in existence. And trust me, I love sugar more than anybody on this planet, probably too much. I'm pretty sure I have a sugar addiction. When I'm on carnivore, I don't crave it at all. I can look at a donut or a piece of cake or a soda or whatever candy that I used to eat all the time, and I don't even want it. It looks disgusting to me. But if I take one bite, different story. I take one bite, it hits my tongue, I get the dopamine explosion in my brain, and now I am the sugar monster. I want every sugar molecule on the planet. Take me to a buffet right now. I'm going to eat 10 pounds of anything that has any, not just sugar, but any carbohydrates at all. I could eat 20,000 calories. I'm not even kidding, in one day. I'm not playing. So, very addictive. The third is dyes. These are artificial colors. Why would they put those in foods? Maybe to make them look better, to make them look more appealing to, so that when you look at it, you immediately start drooling. It's hard to say no when it looks appealing. Now, if it's an off color, you're kind of like, eh. But guess what? When they can control it with an added dye, they can make something that would look terrible look really, really good. So it's just basically putting lipstick on bad food. Trans fats, oxalates, which are in a whole bunch of nuts and green leafy vegetables these days. Oxalates are a big thing. Your body can't really metabolize them very well. They're known as an anti-nutrient, and they can cause a lot of problems, including kidney stones and other things. Oxalic acid is frequently found in kidney stones, and that's formed from oxalates. Extra preservatives and additives. Now, these are in all your processed foods. Why? Think about it. Preservative. It's to preserve the food. It's to add to the shelf life. It'll make something that would last a week or two last years, like literally years. Ask yourself why. Why to preserve? Why do they? What are they doing to make the shelf life? Are they just magically making it last longer? No. What they're doing is they're preventing microbial life. So anything that could live there, bacteria, fungus, mold, all kinds of things. Now, trust me, you're not going to want to eat those, but that's what spoils food. If you go buy, fresh produce or fresh meat or whatever, and you leave it out on the counter for a couple of days, it's spoiled because those microbes can grow there. They can. But if it's packed with preservatives, no microbial growth can occur, and that's what makes it last unnaturally longer. Well, what's another word for antimicrobial? If you're eating this food that's packed with these things, it's basically an antibiotic. or an antifungal or an anti-whatever, any sort of a microbe, when it goes through, what do you think's happening to your friendly bacteria in your gut? Your microbiome. What do you think's happening? It's killing them. They can't survive it either. And so when it goes down there, it's just causing massive problems and what they call dysbiosis in the gut. And that alone can lead to leaky gut or IBS. It can compromise the lining of your gut. Once you compromise that, the gut is the pathway for so many different diseases. And usually it is directly tied to autoimmune. If you get diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, it's almost a guarantee that your gut is involved on some level. You may not have a gut diagnosis, but your gut is still involved. That's what happened to me. I had multiple diagnoses. I had, ankylosing spondylitis. I had psoriatic arthritis, had rheumatoid arthritis. This is all coming from rheumatologists telling me this. And no one ever mentioned the gut. No one mentioned anything about that. I had to do that outside at a different doctor. And so I knew there was a gut tie because when I did try a few different diets, there was a little bit of improvement, but nothing was as powerful. Nothing even came close to what Carnivore did for me. Nothing. So moving on. Next one is industrial grains, your refined carbs, and then gluten. We know that a ton of people either have a gluten sensitivity or they have celiac disease, which is terrible because, like I said, gluten's in everything. These refined carbohydrates, they're addictive. They taste good. I'm not going to lie. They do. And it's a cheap source of food as well. And so it's affordable is what I'm saying. Most people can afford it. And when you put something that's affordable, tastes good, and is addictive, it's going to be pretty easy to sell that. It's very profitable. Next one is nuts and legumes. They're packed, like I said, with anti-nutrients, not just the oxalates, but also your phytates or your phytic acid. And what these do is they're called anti-nutrients for a reason. When they go through, they'll either A, prevent the absorption of nutrients you would have gotten from that meal because they prevent it. Some of them will even actually go through and strip nutrients out of you. It's almost like they go through as an empty sponge and they pull nutrients that you had out. And it's just bad. It leaves you depleted, it leaves you deficient, and it's not good. MSG and emulsifiers, artificial flavors, and phytoestrogens, which are, they're heavy in things like with soy or corn derivatives. So again, SAD TOXIN MAP. Seed oils, added sugars and sweeteners, dyes, trans fats, oxalates, extra preservatives and additives, industrial grains, nuts and legumes, MSG and emulsifiers, artificial flavors, and phytoestrogens. And so all of that is what you're not getting in Carnivore. And I can't put enough exclamation points as to that is why it's working in today's world. That's why it's working. If you go back 100 years when most people used to only eat whole foods anyway, this diet wouldn't work near as well because it already didn't have these things. And in fact, any diet that removes those things, if you're eating those on a consistent basis, it doesn't matter whether you go carnivore or if you go vegan or whatever anywhere in between. If you're removing those things, you are going to notice a vast improvement in your diet. Now, what I love about Carnivore is it's just the most powerful elimination diet. It removes more than any other diet on the planet. And it gives you there's no holes, it gives you everything you need, especially if you're eating, what they call nose to tail carnivore, where you're actually incorporating organ meat in as well, which are highly super packed with vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, in there as well. So, what I would say is if you've never tried anything like this, eat real food for like 7 days, just for 7. I would challenge you to do more than that. Do 30 or 60 or even 90, and I bet you're going to have some pretty explosive results, especially if you've been eating anything close to the standard American or, the standard American diet, or the acronym SAD diet. If you're removing all that stuff, do it I'm telling you, try it for 7 days. You be the judge, see how you feel. Another thing is stop chasing supplements. Nowadays, there's every day you wake up and there's this new supplement that people are talking about, and it's supposed to be the best thing since sliced bread. It'll cure every disease and give you energy and make you sleep like a champ and raise your testosterone and whatever else it may do. Stop that. Just stop. You don't really need to add anything. In fact, a lot of people, they're in the mindset that they just need to add the next thing, whether it's another doctor or another medication or a supplement or whatever it may be, when a lot of times it's elimination that actually needs to happen. Now, think about what I just said. I just told you to eliminate things. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm trying to save you money. I'm trying to tell you to stop buying some of those things that they haven't been working. If you've been doing it for years and you still feel like crap, why keep buying it? Why keep taking it? Challenge that idea. Honestly, challenge it seriously, because sometimes the answer is eliminating the things that you don't need, and then giving that body of yours the chance to do what it does best, to heal, to get to the bottom of and when you can remove the toxins and you remove the things that are feeding that inflammation, you essentially put that fire out. Then it goes, "Oh, thank God I can finally heal myself and I'm not having to direct all my resources to removing these toxins on a daily basis." Now, another thing that I'll challenge you is to start to question every truth where, someone stands to profit from your sickness. Ask the question, before I go see this doctor, do they stand to profit from me being sick? Or, whatever it may be. Just stop and ask, because I promise you, if you ask that question and run that filter first, you'll really second guess whether what you're being sold is actually just going to be profitable for someone else, basically is in the form of a subscription while you are, stay sick, or it's not. And if it's not, if it's something that's root causal that gets to the bottom of it, that actually gets rid of your symptom for good because it got to the source, that's probably more in line with what you're after anyway. Um, you know, that basically wraps up what we're going to talk about today. I mean, I do want to say, health isn't complicated, but today it's become corrupted. Today, there's systems that are being fed. That if they're left the way that they are, it's massively profitable for these big organizations that honestly helped to create them and do not want them to go away anytime soon. And with how addictive some of these foods are, um, and addiction is real. It is hard to overcome some of these things until you get sick enough. Now, once you get sick enough, you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you get desperate and you get willing to do anything. And I'm speaking from experience here because it took me over a decade of being sick to finally get that desperate. And actually, I had to be told by a couple of doctors that I wasn't going to be around much longer. They told me that the inflammation had been so high that it was eroding C1 and C2, the two vertebrae in my neck, which I was in massive pain from that, but I didn't know they were eroding. And they said that there was so much erosion happening that those two vertebrae were becoming so thin and brittle that, if I took a hit to the head, or if I was roughhousing, or if I was playing basketball, if I was in my car and I got rear-ended, it could fracture quite easily. I went to a neurosurgeon. He confirmed it with the imaging. So they were absolutely right. And I found out that there wasn't much we could do. There was a very invasive surgery that was going to come with a ton of collateral damage that he didn't even recommend. And even if he would have, it sounded terrible. He said, we're just going to have to watch and see. If it gets that bad, we'll have to do it. But multiple of these doctors did confirm that if I took a fracture there, just like a spinal injury, however high up on the spine it happens, affects everything below it. You could become a paraplegic or a quadriplegic. Well, if you take an injury all the way up, at C1 and C2, which are the two highest vertebrae on your entire spine, then that affects everything below it. C3 controls your respiration. So yes, they told me that I could die. That's what finally got my attention. That's why I got desperate. And thank God I did, because that's why I finally sought out and found Carnivore. I would have never tried it otherwise. I wouldn't have done it. I just wouldn't have. It sounded too preposterous to me to try it. But I'm telling you guys, I decided to give it a 30-day try. And in just 2 weeks, I felt the inflammation going down in a more powerful way than all the dozens of medications that the rheumatologist had me on, including the big guns, including the Humiras and the Imbrels, and I could give you a whole list of them. that are massively immunosuppressive. A diet, an elimination diet, was more powerful than those. I felt the flames going down inside in a more powerful way than any of those medications were ever able to do. And guess what? The only side effects were good. I had more energy. I was less swollen. I was less inflamed. I could sleep better. I was in a better mood. I had more mental clarity. My relationships were getting better. I wanted to work out. I wanted to go in the backyard and play with my kids. Felt like my old self. And I couldn't believe it. It was that good. I can't emphasize how good it was for me. I'm not saying it's going to be that powerful for everybody. And a lot of days, a lot of people are just doing carnivore simply to lose weight. Let me tell you, I'm just going to be clear. I did lose weight, but I didn't lose a single pound for the first 6 to 7 months I was on the diet. But I felt so good, and my symptoms were going away, and I had what I call vitality. I felt great. It came back. I didn't care. I could have gained 50 pounds. I would have kept doing this weight. I didn't do it for weight loss, and so I have to stress that point because a lot of people are doing it for that these days. But let me tell you, what happened with me was kind of the long road to weight loss. Let me explain. So what happened with me is, like I said, I felt so much better. I was able to sleep and recover and have my energy back that I wanted to work out. I hadn't been able to because when I was massively inflamed and sick, when I did work out, it only made me that much more inflamed. I couldn't even walk right for 3 days afterwards. So I didn't want to work out. I got punished when I did. It was painful to do it. It was more painful afterwards. I swole up, it was bad. But once all that went away with carnivore, not only did I sleep better and all this other stuff, I started working out, and slowly but surely, I had lost a lot of my muscle mass over the years from not being able to, and so I had to kind of slowly build up. But I finally got to where I could work out about 5 to 6 days a week. Now, what happened was I started putting lean mass. I started putting muscle back on, and you can imagine with the amount of protein I was getting through carnivore. I mean, think about it. Every meal I ate was packed with protein, packed, jam-packed, and so that plus also, it's been proven nowadays, carnivore definitely naturally increases your testosterone level. So my hormones balanced back out. And I could prove, the lab work showed that, over the course of 6 to 7 months, every month it kept going naturally up. And so what happened over time is I was able to add enough lean mass that I changed my metabolic rate drastically. My base metabolic rate skyrocketed because I was just using more calories, just sitting on the couch watching TV. I was burning more calories. Well, what happened is I finally got to the tipping point, and all of a sudden the weight just started. It was almost like it melted off. After I got to about the 6 to 7 month mark, every month you could see a big difference. And by the end of the year, I'd lost 50 to 60 pounds from the day I had started. And it just so happened I started on January 1st. So it was real easy to track. I started on New Year's Day. So a year later on New Year's Day, I took a picture, and I could not believe the contrast from my before and after from 1 year on carnivore. And I have to stress, it was 1 year of strict carnivore. I did not have a cheat day, a cheat meal, even on my anniversary, my birthday, any holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, didn't matter. No cheating. That's how bad I felt. I have to stress, that's how desperate I was. And so I have to say, if you're that desperate, if you've been beat up by some autoimmune conditions and you're going to the doctors and you're taking all these medications and it's not working and you're only getting sicker, or maybe that symptom goes away but a new one pops up, I'm with you. I had symptoms head to toe. It was systemic chronic inflammation. If that is you, or if it's someone you know or love, please share this episode with them. Tell them to contact me because I would love to share my story with them. That's their decision if they want to try this. I'm not telling anybody that they should just drop everything and go do this. I want this to make sense. I want this to be your decision, because if it's not, you're probably not going to stick with it long enough. It is a restrictive diet. It is probably hard for most people to do. And if you're only doing it for weight loss, I see a lot of people start it and then within 30 days or less, they're like, I tried it. It didn't work. And I'm like, how long did you try it? For about 3 weeks. I didn't lose any weight. And I'm like, it didn't even have a chance. It didn't even have a chance. Another common thing that I see people doing is they're not getting enough calories. Carnivore is one of those diets that you need to eat until you are full. If you're coming into it with a calorie restrictive mindset, It's probably not going to work because that's not how carnivore works. You need to eat until you're full and then stop eating. This is one diet that you're not going to overeat because you don't have carbs and sugar driving, your cravings. You're only going to get hungry when you're truly hungry. You're not going to get a craving, when you're full, like you do for a donut after you just ate a full meal or a piece of cake or dessert or something sweet. You know how you could eat until you're stuffed. You can't take another bite of normal food, but oh, you got room for that dessert. Well, you're not going to have any of that on carnivore. And so you don't have to worry about that side of things. You're going to eat until you're full. You're going to stay full and you're going to feel good. Okay. So I can't stress that enough. But like I said, guys, if you know anybody who's struggling with any of that, please contact me. I hope today's episode was helpful. I will say this: once you see the lies that I've exposed on today's episode, you can never really unsee them because it's common sense. Somebody's gaining from the status quo. It's not, and it's some big organizations. Somebody stands to gain. So guys, follow me at Meet the Truth Podcast. Follow me at CarnivRx. I'm on all the socials. Basically, if you search for that, you're going to find it there. Follow there for more truth and transformation. Until next time, everybody, stay good.